and welcome back. I'm Nicole, a cottage witch, and today I'm doing my book wrap-up, which is the last thing I think I have to do this weekend. So this month, meaning last month, well, June, I read a few things. So one of them was In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom by Yeonmi Park. It was really interesting. I know on social media she's sort of gone off the deep end of the alt-right conspiracies in the US, which is a bit unfortunate. But this book was pretty interesting. I mean, it was depressing. It's not cheerful. They went through a lot, her family, to get out of North Korea. And even in North Korea, it was pretty brutal. Yeah, it was, but it was interesting. And it was interesting reading it after, I can't remember the name of the other book, but a journalist wrote it, having been told the story of a North Korean man. Read it a couple of months ago, and it was he talked about how difficult it was to verify anything because you can't actually go into North Korea and verify things. So, you know, everything in the book is taking her word for it, but I don't know, if the North Korean government disagrees with her account, it's probably accurate. Even if she has gone a bit extremist in the US now. But yeah, so that was the first one. And then I read a book that I listened to the audiobook of, which was The Land in Our Bones, which was really interesting. It's sort of a herbalism, sort of a learn to get your feet in the dirt and connect with the land sort of book. But it was about the Levant, the Lebanon particularly, because I think the author is Lebanese, but also Palestine and Syria, because, you know, the modern borders are all artificial. Anyway, so it's about a lot of plants that I don't connect with personally because I'm not from there and they don't grow where I am, but it was really interesting to read. And then I read The Call of the Runes, or just Call of the Runes, I suppose, by Walter McGrory. This is really good. It goes over each of the runes of the Elder Futhark, starting with just sort of an overview, goes through some of the rune poems, whatever rune poems exist, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Anglo-Saxon. Bits of the Havmal, where they're relevant, anything that the rune has been carved on, not anything, but like certain key things that he knows that it's been carved on, jewelry or utensils or things like that. And then cultural relevance and conclusion. So this gets more into his personal interpretation of what it might mean esoterically, whereas the original stuff is more historically accurate, which I appreciate. And so it's been really interesting to read. He does have videos on YouTube of the first 15, I think, of 24. So hopefully he'll keep making those because they're really good. Then I read Seiðr by Katie Gerrard, which was also really good. She talks, it's mostly about her experience of Seiðr. She does talk a bit about the historical sources, but she mentions Annette Høst, who has some videos on YouTube here as well, who talks more about the historical sources and what's known historically. And then Katie Gerrard talks more about her personal experience of trying to revive this practice in her own life. And it's so good. It's really interesting. I don't know why I didn't read it for a long time, because it's on Audible, and I just didn't. I don't know why. But anyway, I'm getting into it, into Seiðr now, like learning about it and trying to practice it. And yeah, so that was really interesting. And then I listened as well to the Poetic Edda, and the Saga of the Volsungs, both translated and read by Jackson Crawford, who also has a YouTube channel, which is fantastic. He's not into the sort of esoteric stuff, mystical stuff to do with runes or anything spiritual. He's, I don't know what his doctorate is in exactly, if it's in like history or archaeology or what, but he's very like just the facts, which is cool. You gotta have that perspective as well, I think. And so he's done these translations, and they're really fun. They're really easy to read, well, listen to. And yeah, I enjoyed those a lot. And then I listened to The Path of the Hedge Witch by Joanna van der Hoeven. It was pretty good. It was more like cottage witchery than hedge witchery. She doesn't talk a lot in any of her books. I think I've read about 3 of them now about hedge riding. Like she mentions it in passing, but doesn't really go in depth in any of the books I've read about hedge crossing. This book also perpetuates a couple of inaccurate myths that King James changed the Bible to say "thou shalt not suffer a witch to live" instead of poisoner. That's a myth. You can easily Google previous English translations of the Bible and find witch every time. And then the origin of the word Easter, or the Ostara, basically. And so the way I understand it, and this I got from the podcast Data Over Dogma. There's a scholar, one of the 2 hosts is a scholar, and was talking about how Easter was named after the month that was named after this goddess. So Easter was not named after the goddess specifically. Somebody compared it to using Taco Tuesday to honor the god Tyr, which seems like a fairly reasonable comparison. And, you know, if you want to do that, knock yourself out, but that's not why it started or what it was named after. So, like Taco Tuesday was not named after the god Tyr is what I'm saying, even though Tuesday is. So it's sort of the same kind of situation going on there. Anyway, the other book I read of van der Hoeven's was the book of Hedge Druidry. And it's also a good cottage witchcraft book. It's a little bit more of the hedge writing in it. Not Druidry as far as I can tell. Lora O'Brien's channel. She's an Irish druid. I think in Irish she calls it an Irish dree, something like that. Probably mispronouncing it, but anyway, I don't know what there is of Druidry in here, but I don't think it is actually Druidry. I think it's just cottage witchcraft, but it's a good cottage witchcraft book. She just seems to have an issue with like naming things. And then I read this one, Conjuring Dirt, by Taren S. The Magic of Footprints, Crossroads, and Graveyards. This was really cool. It didn't really go into the dirt of gardens or anything, which I would have loved personally, but it was a pretty cool book. She talks about the different uses for dirts and then goes into more about each of these 3 types of dirt. How to use them, where to find them, how to be respectful if you're going to take some, and so on. So that's pretty cool. Oh, and there's a Crossroads Terrace Road in here, which I might do at some point. So yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot. And then I read To Fly by Night, which is edited by Veronica Cummer, about the craft of the hedge witch. So it is basically a collection of essays by a whole bunch of different people. And as with any collection of essays, some were fantastic, a couple were terrible, and most were somewhere in between. So there were some that I really liked. Ironically, Veronica Cummer's was not one of them. She had some stuff in there that I was like, is this, like, you're talking about culturally specific things, I think, in an inaccurate way in that one. But there were some other ones that were pretty cool. So overall, I think I'd recommend it just to get an idea of how different people do things and what different traditions are. Like, some are Italian. I think there was something Slavic in here at one point, which is very much not my thing. But yeah, it was fun. I've tabbed a few things to go back and look into for in the stories that I really particularly liked. So yeah, that was fun. And then I read Under the Witching Tree by Corinne Boyer. I've got Under the Brambling, what is, now I'm messed up the name. Oh well, the second one. I've got the second one, I'll read that next, which is all about other types of plants. So this is about trees. And then I think the third one might be about poisonous plants, but I'm not sure. Under the Dragon Root. It's only out in the fancy, expensive version first, so I'm waiting for the paperback. So I haven't read that one yet. But basically, every chapter is about a different tree. She's got some interesting stuff. I sort of skimmed over some of the appendices because some of that I already know how to do. But every chapter spends time with a different plant going over some of the folklore. And then at the end, some of the folk medicine and her personal practices. And it's really fun. And then some different things you can make if you're so inclined. Yeah, so I loved it. There's something about the way she writes that's like, takes me a while to get through, so it's a bit slower for me to read. It's not like, maybe it's not the most compelling writing style for me, but I really like the content of all of her books. I don't know what it is. It's something like that. Because I never get through her books very quickly, but I always really enjoy them when I do. So that's Under the Witching Tree. And then I read, just finished today, 13 Pathways of Occult Herbalism by Daniel A. Schulke, and I can't say I'd recommend this one. But then again, it's just not my, it's very much not my style. He's a little too pretentious. He's way too formal. The writing style is way too formal. Not academic exactly, just really formal, like ceremonial magic formal. And that's just so not my thing. I'm much more the folk tradition route. And so it's, I don't know, it's weird. I didn't really like it at all, but other people do. So maybe if ceremonial, more ritual, formal stuff is your thing, maybe it's for you. I don't know. The language is very formal. So the first section is the 13 pathways that he defines, which don't really agree with how I practice, but okay. And then the next section is gardens. Like this is one of them, Garden of Perfumery, Garden of Restoration. I can't remember how many of those there are, a lot. Which also doesn't really agree with how I practice, but okay. And different ways of transmitting it. And so some of the stuff actually in the last section that he talks about is kind of interesting. Because it talks about the more formal ways that this information has been transmitted, which is interesting to know. As I said, I tend to go the more folk route, which is not always written down and it's just more intuitive, so that's me. And then some practice stuff of how it's actually used today. This section was kind of interesting, but again, just really way too formal for me. So yeah, I don't know that I'll keep that one. But yeah. And then, so that's what I've read this month. What I'm gonna read next month is, there's a tarot readathon that Diges, I don't know if that's how you say her name, apologies if it's not, Book World, and Noelle 7 Pages. I'll link them down below in the intro video, excuse me, down below so you can watch it if you're interested. But I did the first pull, and what they've got basically is you're grouped into 4 houses which align with the 4 suits of the tarot. So I'm in Pentacles on their Discord, and then you pull tarot cards, and each tarot card aligns with a reading prompt, and then you find a book that aligns with that. So I pulled the Page of Pentacles, or the Princess of Discs. This is with the Morea tarot, tied in Italian. I'm not good at Italian, but it's a Thoth clone basically. I love it. And so the prompt that goes with this card is the shortest book on your TBR. So I went through my little stack of books from the Middle East and around the world that I'd been planning to read at the beginning of the year that I haven't gotten to yet because, you know, time. And this was the shortest one. The City Where Dreams Come True by Gulsifat Shahidi. It's actually half this length. She's a Tajiki writer, I think. Yeah. So it's a collection of 4 short stories, actually, which I didn't realize at first, but okay. And it's really goes up to here. So it's really only this thick in English, because then it's got the dual text in, I don't know if this is Tajik or Russian, but this is the only version I could find. And then there are a bunch of other titles from the same publishing company in the back. And it's really hard to find Tajiki authors. So hopefully I'll like this, because it was one of the only ones I could actually get my hands on in Canada in English. So that will be my first read of July. So that'll be cool. Anyway, I'll link that below if you're interested in joining in. I may do little shorts throughout the month, because I don't know that I'll always have the energy to do like vlog type things and then put things together, and that just seems like too much work. But anyway, if you want to join in on that, it sounds like it will be a lot of fun. So that's my reading wrap up for June. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.